Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
West Ham and Newcastle United offices have been raided by revenue and customs officials as part of an investigation into alleged income tax and national insurance fraud in football. It's understood Newcastle's managing director has been arrested. Financial records, computers and mobile phones were seized in the swoop by up to 180 officials. West Ham says it's cooperating fully with the inquiry. Our sports editor, Dan Rowan, reports now from Newcastle.
It was the day the taxman came calling on English football. London's iconic former Olympic Stadium, now the home of West Ham United, being raided. These just some of dozens of revenue and customs officials who swooped on the club's offices this morning. At the same time, here at Newcastle United, a member of the public captured a similar scene at St James's Park. Once again, documents were seized. The players left stunned meanwhile, as investigators also paid a visit to the club's training ground. In a statement, HMRC said it had arrested several men working within the professional football industry for a suspected £5 million income tax and national insurance fraud. This criminal investigation, it said, sends a clear message that whoever you are, if you commit tax fraud, you can expect to face the consequences. What's happened today, both here in Newcastle and at West Ham, is part of a wider investigation that's seen 180 revenue and customs officials deployed across both the UK and France. And this afternoon, the Premier League leaders Chelsea were drawn into the controversy, saying that they had been questioned in connection with the raids. One of those arrested is thought to be Newcastle United's managing director, Lee Charnley, the right-hand man to club owner Mike Ashley.
I think there are a lot of people in the business of football who believe that non-disclosed payments is endemic in the game, and I think also for Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs to deploy quite so many officers on what's clearly quite a far-reaching investigation, I'm not inclined to believe they're doing that on flippant ground. So I think it's pretty serious.
HMRC has been taking a closer look at football, issuing a signal of intent last year at a parliamentary hearing.
We have 43 players, 8 agents and 12 football clubs currently under inquiry around the issue of image rights, and it's that question about are they getting that right in the division.
Just 2 days ago, Newcastle United enjoyed promotion back to the Premier League. Today's events, however, have meant the mood of celebration has been dampened. Yeah, rather than looking forward to that bright future, tonight Newcastle United know they face questions about the past. Football faces an increasingly difficult relationship with the taxman, whether it's indebted clubs facing winding up petitions for the non-payment of tax, or millionaire players facing scrutiny for their use of image rights, or, as seems the case here, cross-border transfers involving players and agents. It's pretty clear that despite the vast wealth the game generates and the power that it enjoys, this huge investigation, both in France and here, at training grounds being raided and at clubs, documents and computers being seized, it shows that the finances of the sport are under the spotlight like rarely before.
Many thanks, Dan.
Nearly 200 tax fraud investigators raided football clubs in the UK and France today, making several arrests on suspicion of income tax and national insurance fraud. Newcastle's managing director is reported to be one of those arrested just 2 days after the team celebrated promotion to the Premier League. West Ham has also been targeted, and the club says it is cooperating with the investigation. Peter Smith has the latest.
The taxman has come knocking at the door of English football. There were dawn raids in Newcastle, at the home of the football club and at the home of United's managing director Lee Charnley. It's understood he has been arrested. HMRC officers were also inside the stadium and at the training ground, taking away evidence for their investigation. It's barely been 48 hours since Newcastle were celebrating promotion and their return to the Premier League. The mood was more sombre as players left training this morning. Arrests have also been made in London, where HMRC turned up at West Ham United Stadium. Officers seized business records, computers and mobile phones. West Ham say they are cooperating fully.
This is a really big issue. For the tax authorities to be involved on raids against these clubs of this scale shows there must be a major problem they're concerned about. There are quite strict rules for clubs about paying their taxes on time, and the football authorities say they enforce those, so people will rightly question how it's been possible for this issue to arise in the first place.
This is a cross-border investigation between England and France over a suspected £5 million fraud believed to focus on football transfers. HMRC visited Chelsea today as well, but there were no raids there and no arrests. Dr Dan Plumley is a specialist on football tax. He believes this is just the start.
HMRC have been looking into football clubs for a long time now, since the early 2000s. What is surprising is the kind of public nature of this in terms of how the story broke, and almost HMRC trying to call out in some ways and say, look, this is criminal behaviour, and we're coming after you.
HMRC would not confirm which transfers they're concerned about, but released a statement confirming they have arrested several men working within the professional football industry for suspected income tax and national insurance fraud. The £5 million HMRC is chasing seems like a drop in the ocean for this industry, but today's raids are a warning shot. No amount and no organisation is beyond the reach of the taxman. Peter Smith, ITV News, Newcastle.
Well, sports editor Steve Scott is outside Newcastle United's ground, St James's Park. Steve, so what exactly is the focus then of this investigation?
Well, Mary, we know the HMRC investigation into football is twofold, really. First of all, into the individual tax arrangements of the footballers themselves, but also into the tax paid on transfer deals. And I think because of the activity in France, we can safely assume today we're talking about the latter. Now, of course, transfer deals generate an awful lot of cash for an awful lot of people. We've got an example of that. We've seen a letter today from an agent instructing his solicitor to split his fee, which amounted to nearly £2 million, 6 different ways, to the agent, to the footballer himself, and then 4 others. 2 of those were companies, and one of those we know to be registered offshore. So it's very, very complicated, and what the HMRC are doing is simply following the money and making sure that the right amount of tax is paid at every turn. As for Newcastle United, they haven't said much all day, but they have just issued a very short statement confirming that one of their members of staff was assisting HMRC with their inquiries, but they said they would be making no further comment tonight.
OK, Steve Scott in Newcastle, thank you.
The football clubs Newcastle United and West Ham United's grounds have been raided in a fraud investigation resulting in several arrests. HM Revenue and Customs say several men working within professional football have been held in an investigation into suspected income tax and national insurance fraud involving 180 of their officers. West Ham United say they are cooperating fully with HMRC to assist their inquiries. Our sports correspondent, Kamian Zeram, has this report.
Tax investigators at Newcastle United, filmed by a passerby. Business records were reportedly seized, as well as computers and mobile phones. Possible evidence in a suspected tax and national insurance fraud. And then several arrests, names as yet unconfirmed. And at the taxpayer-funded former Olympic Stadium, now home to West Ham, who say they are cooperating after they too received a visit from the tax authorities in a football tax fraud probe involving 180 agents that stretches from north to south and then overseas.
The amount of money swilling around world football is bigger than ever, from broadcast rights to transfer money. And HMRC is clamping down. Since 2014, the British taxman has recouped over £150 million from football rule breakers.
HMRC say today's raids are in connection with a suspected £5 million income tax and national insurance fraud, part of a cross-channel investigation that ends up in France. And look at the transfer sums spent by just the 2 clubs known to have been raided today. In the last 7 years, Newcastle spent over £190 million on players, with 15 of them from French clubs. West Ham spent roughly the same, £198 million, signing 5 players from French clubs. The well-off often use havens to store assets, which presents a global challenge for tax authorities.
43 players, 8 agents and 12 football clubs.
And last December, HMRC told a parliamentary committee they were investigating dozens of football players who are suspected of abusing image rights to pay less tax.
I think it's very common, not just in the sports world, but in the performance artists. Image rights have been exploited in structures for a number of years. With transfer fees, I can see that it would be quite easy to structure an arrangement to place money into an offshore environment.
Consider what happened with the world's most famous player, Lionel Messi, convicted last year in Spain of criminal tax fraud. Much of Messi's considerable income consisted of image rights. They were transferred overseas to tax havens, which meant Messi reported almost nothing in taxable income to Spain, where he was tax resident. Newcastle were celebrating promotion back to the Premier League on Monday. Today's news has not gone down well.
It's a shame for the Newcastle fans. They've got nothing to do with tax scandals. They deserve all the happiness that they've got this week.
It all depends on what happens, in the sense that if it's something that's going to be deduction of points, or is it something that would get us stripped of something, of course, that would be a worry.
Football and fraud. A challenge for both HMRC and the football authorities, who could end up issuing fines or even docking points if wrongdoing is eventually found.
Kami and Sarum reporting.